Is everyone here yet? Government has completed the opposition. Is everyone here yet? Semih A.
Our leader of opposition isn't here yet, if I'm not mistaken.
Sorry, I went into the wrong room.
Okay, can we start now? Oh wait, the opposition, so the representative, can you like wrote down who is going to be the leader of the opposition and reply also?
Alright, cool. Fahim can start.
Okay, let's start now. Hi, welcome to the 10th Muslim International School Debating Championship 2021. My name is Fahim. I will be your speaker for this round and the timekeeper. On the government side, we have Star, and the opposition side, we have Semih A. Judging this round will be Andrul Ashraf. I will first like to remind the spectators and audience to keep silence and change your Zoom name into spectator to distinguish debaters and educator from others in this Zoom room. This round will be the silent room. Verdict or any comments will not be given after the debate is finished. So without further ado, on the motion, This house will ban political parties and require all candidates for national public office to seek election as independent candidates. I'll call upon the first substantive speaker, Prime Minister. Here.
Right. Beginning my speech in 3, 2. We can all agree that the current political state of each country, of our country, is in a bad condition, with no chances of improvement, with polarizing government and opposition sides. Therefore, we as the proposition and as the government propose this one simple mechanism to solve the problem, the political state of our country for future betterment. Therefore, what is our mechanism? Our mechanism is we are banning political parties and requiring all candidates for national public office to seek elections as independent candidates. So what does this mean? What does our proposition would look like? We have 4 levels of setup. The first one is every political parties, for example, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, or in Malaysia, the UMNO or PAS parties are all banned. They're not present in our future and they're not there. Therefore, every representative from each location in each country are representing themselves and their ideas based on their political views and based on their solutions for the betterment of the future and of the country. The third one is, how is the government formed? Government are formed using majority votes. So we will have a voting system where 2 stages of voting system. The first one is we'll vote for who is the president or who is the prime minister for that said country. Then we will have another vote for who is the government and who is the opposition side in a political spectrum, meaning to say that who agrees with the president or with the prime minister's views and who disagree with their views. And lastly, lastly is in case of impeachment, there will be no communist vote. The process will just repeat itself, and during their political selection, during their role as prime minister, everyone cannot switch sides between government and opponent and opposition until the next election year occurs again. So that is how our world is being set up. That is what the government wants to prove. That is what the government wants in our world. So what is our burden of proof? What are we as the proposition, as the government want to prove here? We have 2 burden of proof. The first one is remedy political crisis and rivalry between opposition and government. And the second one is enforce the will of the people. All right. First level, status quo. Why rivalry happens between opposition side and government side, between political party? Because people from political party compete because of popularity. They don't want, they just compete because they are blinded by the ideals of garnering votes rather than improving the country, rather than improving the political state of the country, meaning that they want to be the best party, even if it takes destroying the integrity of other parties as well. So what happens is populism happens in the status quo, in the opposition world, meaning that people from each party would be emotional, would be exaggerating political state, will be lying to garner attention, to get attention from the people, from the public. So just they can win for their party, not because they want to improve the political state, but just for their political party to win that election. Meaning that it is not a discussion, it is not a contest of which sides can improve the country, can improve the political climate, but it is a contest of popularity, which sides are able to hurt the opponent side's integrity the most. That is what status quo represents. That is what opposition world is looking right now. So this leads to one thing, which is exaggerated narratives, increased racial tensions between each parties, increased tensions between each parties, and this leads to one thing and one thing only, which is bad discussion in parliament, bad discussion in political discussion in parliament, meaning that there wouldn't be any discussion towards improving the political state, improving the political policies of the country, but it would be bickering, it would be mocking other parties, it would be mocking other parties and hurting their integrity rather than improving the political state, improving the political privacy, a political policy for each party. Before that, POI.
Can you please elaborate on how that's unlikely to happen when you have independent candidates?
Okay, so I'll get to that. Before that, bad discussion in parliament would happen. People would only be in the parliament in discussion to discuss devaluing other parties' flaws, to just identifying other parties' flaws and elaborating that in the discussion, in the political discussion. And this leads to one thing, which is huge time lag in laws and bills. Therefore, comparatively, on the opposition side, there will be less laws being passed, and in the government side, there will be more laws being passed because notice that when representatives, the only candidates are only there from National Public Office, are only there elections, independent candidates, they would more likely be incentivized to carry on to explain and to discuss about political betterment for the politics, because there's no parties that pushing you for populism. They're not here to garner popularity. They're not here to have popularity for their party to win. No, they're here for the betterment of the politics, the betterment of the country, meaning that they would get backlash from public, from the society. Therefore, they would improve their policies and their private policies more, rather than in government side where parties are only there for populism. Therefore, in government sides, we increase the political climate of our country. Proud to propose. Thank you.
So thank you, the Prime Minister, for giving a speech. The Prime Minister spoke for 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Now, I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to deliver the speech. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Can you guys give me a minute?
Okay.
Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In order for the world to actually have some improvement, the government has to have a lot of discussion. And we believe that that will not be attainable in government side because of a few things, and I will explain to you more in my arguments. So firstly, a few responses towards the government side. Firstly, they gave you the mechanism of how they will ban political parties, but they didn't actually clarify to us if they will still allow political coalitions. And I will say why this is relevant and why this is important in my arguments. Secondly, they tell you that politicians can go for election and seek for votes and things like that, and basically campaign, but they didn't say exactly who can compete and who can campaign for those kinds of things. We think that there's a lack of clarification on their side, because the reason why is that these people who campaign can also become corrupt. These people can also become people that will harm the government and the National Public Office at the end of the day. I will explain more in my arguments. They also talk to you about how we need to fight they also tell you the nature of like the government in status quo is that they fight for votes, and they always like try to destroy the image of the other party, which causes no efficiency in the government in the first place. But you have to understand, on our side, we believe that that can still happen on their side. The reason being is that there will not be any efficiency when these independent candidates meet together, but they cannot work together well. I will explain more in my arguments. So basically, let me just go in with my arguments, right? So my main argument is basically the necessity of political parties. Why is it important, and why is it more beneficial to have political parties compared to implementing government's motion? Firstly, it will ensure efficient workflow, right? Understand that when political parties exist because they have worked together for a long time. For example, we have UMNO, right? They have existed for a long time throughout history, and they have supported the fight for Malaysian rights. And we see that they have clear goals and stances and clear objectives that they want to achieve at the end of the day. The comparison between that and the government side, in which these independent candidates, they might have different views, right? They might have different stances, and they don't have a clear objective on where they want to go in the first place. And this will be problematic because when you group all these people together in a national public office, that will lead to like a difference in views and a difference in understanding, and they don't have the same objectives and clear stances that will lead to a more efficient government, which is why we believe we should defend status quo, because political parties have their own objectives and they have clear views as to how they want to achieve at the end of the day, right? So even if they try to say that these political parties have a lot of conflict and they become very like immature and they try to harm the other side's image, but we have to understand that that is not mutually exclusive, because on their side, when these independent candidates, they get elected, right? So also like that in nature, they also want to ruin the image of other political candidates. They also want to win the election. We see that that's the same thing that's happening on their side, right? So either way, both sides, either the bad mouthing will still have the fight, the interest of ruining the other person's image in the first place. So we don't see how that actually is only apparent on our side. Secondly, they can actually avoid conflict, right? Because when they have the same ideology, stances, and goals, they can agree better on making decisions and governing the country better. Because when these individual parties combine, agree on certain to reach to a decision, which will lead to laws taking longer for them to actually taking longer for them to actually pass for these laws and agree to these laws and pass for these laws in the first place. Thirdly, if these political parties are like problematic as they say, and that these people aren't able to change their stances, they aren't able to progress at the end of the day, we see that party coalitions also still exist, right? Because not necessarily do political parties only. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Okay, sorry. Continuing on, even if party coalitions still exist, right? So they can still share views and gain progression because of the combination of these political parties in the first place. So they can have that difference of opinion, they can still progress in the first place. So for example, we have PH, right? We have Pakatan Harapan, in which UMNO, PAS, and Bersatu Amanah, they're all grouped together in one political coalition, so they can actually work well together and share their different opinions and reach to a more progressive objective at the end of the day. Sorry. Okay, moving on. Fourthly, it's much more clearer for their side, right? It's much more clearer for our side, right? Because when you have political parties, you have a clear objective as to what you want to pursue. So these people can actually engage more in politics. Understand that the public doesn't really want complicated things to understand in politics, because it's difficult for these people the public opinion already has a lack of interest towards politics, which is why we think that by having these independent candidates will only make the situation even more complicated, which is harder for them to follow. Which is why we believe that political parties can have actually better influence and more influence as a whole, because they're a whole group working together. So when you have a much larger influence, you can actually work as a group and have a large influence in the first place. Compared to their side, right? Why is this individual campaigning not going to work in the first place? It's because these individuals, it's harder for them to campaign, it's harder for them to stand out, it's harder for them to actually gain recognition for their stances, because they don't have a group that's supporting them and a group that can advocate for their kinds of stances and their kind of manifestos in the first place. So another problem with having these individual campaigning is they don't have clear views, right? So when the public sees that they are less like to have clear views, right? So when people see these individuals campaigning, they will think it's hard for them to differentiate as to like what this politician is aiming for and what another politician is aiming for. So it's harder for them to decide on which politician is better to choose in the first place. And also be less efficient, right? Because you have to work as a person individually to campaign for every single thing that you want to do. You have to think on yourself, and you don't have a group to discuss your objectives within the first place. So when you don't have a group to discuss your objectives, you don't have a group to discuss stances and things like that, it will lead to like a more biased opinion. It will lead to like a limited opinion in the first place. So when these people campaign, it's less likely for them to be effective in the first place. So if you want a world where we actually fight for the importance of political parties, and we tell you why exactly it's important and why it can impact society even better, and we already explain to you why government sides mechanism won't work, then go with side opposition.
Okay, thank you to the leader of the opposition for the speech. The leader of the opposition spoke for 6 minutes and 52 seconds. Now I would like to invite Deputy Prime Minister to deliver the speech. Here.
Hello. Am I crystal clear? Okay, cool. Starting my speech in 3, 2. Huge chunk of office material is assuming that the WhatsApp group of the governments in our world are going to be inefficient. They can't come to a consensus, and we tell that all of these are not only going to be false. We're also going to prove to you how the most efficient government only able to be formed only inside proposition with a lot of reasons later in my speech. I have a few pieces of rebuttals. Let's talk about opposition's piece of material talking about efficiency. They told us a lot about this. They told us that, look, you can't come to a consensus, you can't make a decision, you're going to be lost in the map of a lot of political ideologies. It's not true for 2 reasons. Number 1, this is highly not true. We don't see how any reason why they wouldn't have the need and motive to coalesce. Notice that as independent candidates, you can't stand on the middle ground. You either need to be the best governmental office, like the best government officer in the world, or you have to be a good opposition. You can't stand on the fence. Hence, this means that you either way, you still need to collectivize in order for you to be able to like manifest that you're a good leader to your constituent then. So we don't see how they'll be lost and you aren't able to come to a consensus. They still have an incentive, and in fact, we think that discussions in their world are more likely going to be better because there's less bureaucracy in their parties. We didn't see all voices are counted. Number 2, the reason why efficiency is not efficiency is going to be true on our world is because objectives can still be created for the good of the people, especially only in our world when your particular political candidate needs to do the best as they can in order for them to maintain re-election. Compared to on your world, then political candidates can get away a lot of election terms doing nothing as a government, as the part of the government, but still maintaining their seat because they're associated with a party to begin with. We don't see how efficiency loses out in our world. It's much better than our only in proposition. Let's talk about bad discussions in parliament, because LO came up and told us that we're going to have bad discussions in parliament too. A few things here, right? Number 1, it seems like they aren't able to mitigate their harm to begin with. But number 2, the reason why we have less, let's scale the reason out here. There are 2 reasons why people on our are going to be less populistic and less incentive to have rivalries. Number 1, party integrity. Notice that the people on your are going to have incentive to protect the party integrity, and since you need to do it as quickly as you can, you need to be populistic. You have the need to exaggerate information to begin with. But second, since within the party itself, you need to be promoted in order for you to achieve higher ranks in the government. Now you need to be the most member of your party. This means that as long as you garner the most votes for your party, rather be populistic to begin with, then this is the exact reason why there's going to be bad discussion in your parliament. These 2 reasons aren't existent in our world. We're going to be running independently. You're going to have no party pushing you. Your salary or your ranking wouldn't be based on how high you are in the party's pyramid, but rather than your merit itself. Let's talk about political apathy, because LO came up and told you, people will really be interested in politics. There's 2 reasons why this is not true. Number 1, we make politics much more simple because there's less polarization. It's less about party rivalries. It's more about actual laws discussed in parliament to begin with. Another reason why this is not true is because we also make it simpler, because the campaigning in our elections are going to be much more digestible rather than its packed nationalistic narratives, inside opposition. We say that the information in campaigning, your manifestos, are going to be much more detailed and closer to the people only inside opposition, hence achieve higher political awareness. Let's talk about coalitions here, because L attempted to come up and say that we did a huge sin into the debate, saying that we didn't ban coalitions. This is not true. We already told you how we're going to go, all of them going to be running independently. There's going to be zero association. But also, if you think about it, right, if you take a step back, it's strategically inconsistent with their whole idea of arguing these coalitions, because they told us that their whole idea of initiation, like they argued to us there's going to be inefficiency in our work due to no unity. But then they told us that there's going to be coalitions in our work, pick a side. Last rebuttal. Elections are hard because no one can advocate for you. Exactly. We don't want anyone people to advocate for you. We want you to be running for yourself and you win all of the votes, all the ticks that you earn in the election year because of you, rather than party integrity or a lot of old people behind you that has done something when they were young, merit associated to you. Let's move on to my argumentation. Before that, any POIs? Cool. Number one, argumentation. How we enforce the will of the people. Level one, how are they blinded? There's three reasons why they blinded, how they vote for the party rather than the individuals. Number one, there's going to be history background. For example, that particular party was the one party that freed you from the British like 60 years ago. So now they will vote for that particular party rather than actually evaluating their current merit. Number two, sure, they might vote for the party merit, but it's only from few people who used to be politically active for a few years back, or they're already retiring soon. So we see like the party merit is distributed throughout the whole party. We say that the evaluation then is harmed. Number three, this concerns especially the right-wing parties. Your right-wing parties are more likely to be nationalistic in order for them to gain the most votes. Level two, what are the effects of this? They're going to be less competent leaders in office and there's going to be polarization on the ground. But the question here becomes, how does, in comparison, side opposition enforce the will of the people? Now, two reasons. Number one, people vote more rationally because evaluation is only based on the merit of that person rather than associating that person with the whole party. But second reason here is people dive into manifestos much better and achieve better political awareness rather than during campaigning, they will only say what their whole other party members say. So this is the exact reason why people vote more rationally. Number two, more competent people. That's 5 reasons. Bear with me. Number one, you're going to have much more better discussions as proposed by my guide. Number two, you're going to have better accountability. You're going to be less immune to backlash because when you're in the opposition, when you do something wrong, there's a scandal, your whole party going to back you up or your party integrity will going to back you up. Number three, there's going to be much more incentive since there's no dependency to get re-election. You can't associate yourself with that particular old person in your party to get re-elected. You have to perform it yourself. Number four, you aren't restricted by parties. So then every spectrum of the political spectrum is represented in your ministerial discussions every Wednesday, for example, in Malaysia. So then we have a more cohesive discussion rather than on your will only the top leaders of the party talk. Last one, party bureaucracy. There's going to be seniority. Hence, when you enter the political realm, we say that these guys are going to be restricted by your parties and you can't say certain things for your party then. The comparison here is the world on our side, especially on our side, exclusively, is that we're going to have much more a better political climate, less toxicity, which is exactly what side opposition are apparently fighting for. Never prior to oppose.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister, for giving the speech. The Deputy Prime Minister spoke for 7 minutes and 9 seconds. Now I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to giving the speech. Here.
Before I start, can you guys hear my voice?
Yes.
All right. Okay, wait, give me a minute. Mr. Speaker, understand that elections are a very important part of society as a whole today, right? Because every single 4 years, there's going to be an election that's going to basically decide the future of a nation, right? And you have to understand that the reason why political parties exist is to give like a sort of, to give the people a sort of view of what this political candidate is fighting for, and not really like to, make it say, not to really provide as a backup, right? And before I move on with my speech, I would like to give a few like points of rebuttal towards the government side, right? So first of all, the government didn't really clarify on their mechanism or how this motion will actually be implemented, right? Because they didn't really clarify who are going to be the candidate, what are the characteristics of someone who could become like that individual candidate, right? They didn't clarify. Does he need to have a political background? Does he need to have like at least a certain to be of a certain age? Does he need to have like experience in politics? They didn't really clarify. All they said is that they will compete as individual candidates, and this really makes it hard for us because we can't really imagine or see or view who these people would actually be, right? And this makes all the government's points much less likely to happen in the first place. And also, they managed to fail. They failed to explain how does the election actually work, right? So, for example, if the most elected candidate, okay, he'll end up becoming the prime minister, right? So then they didn't really explain to us on how the people below or the people who aren't like the most elected candidate, what positions would they get there, right? Because they didn't really explain to us, right? And so because of this, we think that there are a lot of their arguments are becoming much more irrelevant and much more weaker, right? So first of all, the first argument is about how with political parties, people would want to become leader because of popularity and all that stuff, right? And this will just becoming to get to the point where parties are just pointing out other parties' weakness, and but the government really didn't tell us on how is it unlikely on their side, right? All they said is that these individual candidates would not target for popularity or would not, would not try to become elected because of selfish reasons, right? But they didn't actually give us any reason or prove to us why. Because why? The government didn't clarify who can become a candidate. They didn't clarify what are the qualifications to become that candidate, and this makes it even more unlikely on their side that these people would become logical thinking, because at least on our side, right, in order to become a political representative of a certain party, right, you need to have at least a background or at least some influence towards your people, right? And so because of this, we think it's much more likely that these people who at least have some experience in politics could lead to much more substantial discussions in the parliament in the first place, right? And second of all, the government also said that we want these politicians to win solely because of their efforts, right, and solely because of their struggles, right? Well, we can see that this creates it much more harder for upstart politicians, right, to get to that point, right? Because the government really wants really give us a lot of like comparisons about how like, oh, we want these people who are like young and upstart want to become like want these people to lead the discussions, to become leaders, right? But of the absence of political parties, it makes it more unlikely that these young people that the government is trying to fight for, it makes it less likely that these people are going to get voted for, right? Because understand that people are more likely to vote because the history of these parties still exists, right? Even if we ban these parties, their history still exists, and people still associated with that party will no wait until my rebuttals. They will still be associated with the parties, and they will still get that, if the party is associated with good things, then they will still get that, good association, right? And so it doesn't really explain on how the government side they're trying to talk to us on how that these political candidates are much more likely, the political candidates that they want to lead the discussion, they didn't really clarify to us on how they're likely to get elected for in the first place, right? So yes, yep.
You seem like there's a problem with many political candidates running for office. Don't you think that that's fine, since A, every spectrum is represented, and B, there's self-correcting mechanism of the society to decide who's best? What's wrong with having so many candidates?
Okay, I'll explain that later in my second argument, right? So moving on to my first argument is about the impact of banning these political parties, right? So first of all, you have to understand that these political parties are also a way for these candidates to build their community, right? Because this way, they would at least have a party where people believe their same ideology, right? First of all. And second of all, this party would also provide them resources so they could create programs, like, for example, political rallies, or maybe create funds in order to get votes, right? And without the existence of a political party, it'll be much harder for these candidates to actually build a following, right? And like I said before, because of this, people are more likely to vote because of the history of the candidates. And the candidates that the government wants to win would be less likely to win at the end of the day, right? And the second impact of banning these political parties is that it'll cause conflict in the governing authorities, right? Because you have to understand that in our current system, right, even though there are flaws, we agree there are flaws in our current system, right? However, understand that when we have people of the same party, like ruling in the same government or the party coalition, right, you have to understand that it's much more less less likely to have conflict because of this of the shared ideologies between these people, right? Compared to the government side, right, where due to the fact that all of these people are individuals, right, they don't have like any shared ideologies between each other, right? And this would, at the end of the day, cause more conflict in the discussions. And we think that this would lead to much more slower decision making at the end of the day, right? And thirdly, on how by banning these political parties, it's more likely that these elected candidates would be corrupt, right? Because understand that, like I said before, the people who are representatives of parties, they are people who at least have done something or have proven themselves to contribute to society, right? That's why they become the leader of the party, right? Because these parties, they're not irrational, right? They're gonna choose someone who has a big following and someone who has like who is more likely to be voted for, right? And in order to get to that point, they need to have they need to have a lot of experience, right? And yes, there still might be a chance of corruption on our side, right? But it's much less than on the government side because they didn't clarify to us who these political candidates are in the first place. So moving on to my second argument and to answer the rebuttal on the government side, right? So we have to understand that okay, my second argument is about how it affects society as a whole, right? Because we see that election is something crucial to society, right? It basically decides the future of the country, right? And it's crucial for that people understand who and what they're voting for, right? But we can see that even now, majority of people have trouble with differentiating and understanding what these different parties are fighting for, right? Because a lot of people just aren't body enough, right? People have their own work to do, right? And a lot of people don't really like have that time to be so invested in politics, right? And this is even with political parties, right? And understand that political parties are much more easier to understand because they're compacted in a much more digestible way, right? Compare this to the government side, right? Where they want so many individuals, and it's so impossible to have these people to be able to take into account all of these elections and all of these individuals and all of these candidates, right? And because it's much more harder to understand an individual's um, because first of all, it's much more harder to understand an individual's political ideology, and second of all, because it's so open and anybody can vote for it, then people wouldn't really know who to vote for, right? And so, because of this, if you want a world the where the result of the election is much more beneficial for us at the end of the day, please vote for the opposition side.
Speech. The deputy leader of the opposition spoke for 7 minutes and 38 seconds. Now I would like to invite the government whip to deliver the speech. Here.
Am I clear?
Yes, you are.
In parliament, your politicians bicker with children, and it's become a mocking stock, laughing stock, and it's something that side of government deeply regrets, and it has to change right now. These people do not discourse properly. These people do not think of what's good for the country. In fact, these people only think what is good for the integrity, for the pride, and for the relevance of their political party for many, many years to come, regardless of how stupid their manifestos and how ignorant their points of views may be. Now, let's give a very, very compact and quick recap of what has happened throughout the entire debate. It has been a very tense debate, and let me try to lay it out for you. From the side of government, what we have said, or from the side of government, what we have said is number one, the first speaker has told you how you remedy your political crises and rivalries. We can all agree without a doubt that your political spectrum is number one, a corrupt one, but number two, it is a very, very inefficient and ineffective one. We have told you how the idea of populist people, I've told you how the idea of when it comes to discourse, when it comes to discourse, when it comes to like passing out laws, there are things like mocking people. There are things like thinking about what is good for the image of a certain party for a certain spectrum. These things are always these things are the biggest obstacle when it comes to passing out laws that are number one effective and number two, encompassing the whole entire nation. For example, if we take things like Malaysia, for example, what happens in these courses is, number one, the laws are very ineffective. How people bicker in order to get a certain middle ground, and number two, how it doesn't encompass a lot of things because the laws always focus on a certain spectrum, on certain principles of the certain party itself. And secondly, for the second speaker, he has told you done a very good job in enforcing the will of the people. We have told you how people are blinded by political history. People are blinded by like this party. My parents support this party, so I should support this party as well. This party is Malay. I'm Malay. I'm going to support that party as well. These are all the reasons why your Chinese people, your Indian people always make fun of Malaysian politics. These are the things that have been happening for so many decades, and we want these things to stop, and it has to stop right now. Things like, bureaucracy, or not having a competent leader. Having leaders the only thing about the people that support them. Because like every single party has gathered their own following throughout the course of many years. And what has happened here is people know that whatever I do, there will always be this loyal followers. And now compare this to side of government. So government wants to say that no, stop this. This is all nonsense. But what we want now is we want people to gather following on an individual basis, meaning that they do whatever they have in their power to like garner followers, that make people understand their manifestos, their certain plans. These are the things that only happen on side of government. So those are the two other things that happen throughout this debate on side of government and side opposition. Side government told you we want to solve political crises, which by the way, some opposition seems to not care at all. And we also told you how we, make people make the right decisions, when people see, open their eyes that have been closed for so long. As compared to side of opposition, let's see what they have to say. Side of opposition has to say like basically two basic things. Number one, the idea of we need chemistry amongst people, and number two, they have the idea of people having proper vigilance, proper objectives. The thing is, when it comes to chemistry, we say that no, chemistry is something that is very very like it doesn't just automatically mean you can only be garnered on your side. I mean, in our side, we have politicians, we have candidates that fight very very hard for people to trust them. Because like we said before, these people fight on their own. They don't have any backing up. Like even if they have any scandals, whatnot, people they don't have a certain institution body to back them up. So due to this information, due to this thing that we have here, people will try to make consensus. People will try to portray themselves in the best light possible, and make things happen, make decisions happen. And even if people don't have chemistry, I say that it's all absolutely fine as long as the laws go out. Even if people don't agree with one another, at least we have different people coming from different backgrounds. For example, what will happen in our world is we have a certain person representing certain community A, we have people representing community B, and especially this is important when you have things like minorities. All these certain spectrums of people, the minority of people who are often misrepresented and often not spoken about, will all now have their own voice in parliament, have their own voice in in discourse. So this is very 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 important, number one. And number two, it is also very mutually exclusive. And second thing of all, if you want to talk about objectives, people not having like proper visions, things like this. We say that no, the reason they are elected in the first place because they have very clear objectives. So compared to your side, people more often than not do not vote people based on their objectives. People just vote based on their party. But now people will actually make an active effort to identify the objectives and vote people based on that. In fact, people have to continuously give out very relevant objectives, things like that. So the last thing, however, for me to say is to give an overall view of the what both sides have done in towards achieving their own specific goal. I'm sure that both of us want a proper and healthy political system. And what on the side of government we say that political system right now is corrupt, political system right now is ineffective. For one is people bickering, people are discussing normally, and number two, we want people to make the right decisions and make decisions using this and not this. And compared to side of opposition, what they want to say is the status quo is absolutely fine. I mean, like the whole reason this debate is here in the first place because we identify a problem with the political system, the political system that occurs in today's world. And the reason we're doing this is because we think in switching as compared to the side, we think that it is absolutely fine. And on closing note, let me just say on side of government, what we get is number one, we get discourses that are very, very much more effective because like people do not think about their parties and parties only. People think about trying to sound as smart as they was trying to sound relevant, try to become the candidate with a proper vision, a candidate with a proper set of argumentations, and this leads to more laws being passed out that are efficient, and people, just trying to become the best candidate for the country possible. With all those reasons, I would like a proper political system that should not be scoffed at. With all those reasons, I'm very proud to propose.
Thank you, the government whip. The government whip spoke for 7 minutes and 80 seconds. Now I would like to invite the opposition whip to deliver the speech. Here.
Oh, wait, is my voice okay? Is it okay?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, we tell you that number one, the idea of political ideology is being established at the first place is to tell you what's their point of view on certain things or their ideology at the first place. Because they have this kind of ideology and they have this kind of community, their group, it will lead to people to understand, oh, we see this clear objective, we see clearer vision of what they're presenting at the first place. And because of that, it really shows that because they have that kind of reflection of what does it mean, what does their what's their ideology is, it will lead to people to see politics something that's very simple and people can digest this kind of stuff very easily, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 3 things in my speech. Number 1, issue. Second, why do we win? Number 1, I have 3 issues. First issue, political ideology versus independent candidate. Second, second, government authority. Thirdly, why political ideology in our side? Why using political ideology or having a party is better for people at the first second. So number 1, why political ideology or having a party is better at the first second. We'll tell you that number 1, number 1, it really showed that the reason why this political party exists because they have established the ground. We can see from history, and we can see from history people. We can see from the history the contribution, and even if we ban political parties, it really shows that the contribution of political parties exists at the end of the day. I mean, Speaker, even if they tell you that these people fight for populists, these people, because they have the community, they can manipulate these people. We tell you that no. Why? Because number 1, people are not that dumb or not that rational. And second, even if they are that dumb, we believe these people have the ability to understand the history of the political party at the first, and we believe the reason why them voting, even if that party is a populist political party, they voted them because of the contribution, because of what have they give to the people at the field. And it really show because they have really show a clear objective. They already show a clear contribution on what the side of them, what the political ideology is about at the first place. It really show it lead to people to engage in political ideology or in political ideology in the future, Mr. Speaker. And okay, they tell you how because when we have different ideology of independent candidates, it will lead to people to vote for these people because it represents the ideology of the Speaker. Wait. We tell that number 1. The nature of you being an independent candidate, without number 1, it's really hard for you to build your ground at the first place because it's really hard for you to build your ground. It really leads to people not knowing what are the things you are fighting for. And even if people know, these people don't know whether you have this political experience at the first place, Speaker. And Speaker, we tell that even if outside these people don't know what they are fighting for, at least these people know that these people have political experience at the first compare in your side. You tell us that how yes, it's true, people will vote for them because how they are fighting because of their vision and so on. But we tell you that even if these people are getting elected at the first place, we don't see how them having the power to have this, to have the influence, to have this, to build their ground, will actually benefit them at the end of the day, because we believe not fighting for influencing people is not easy as you know doing campaigns, something like that. And we believe the establishment of you being a political an independent candidate is very hard in your side at the first. Okay, yes, POI.
The fact that half of America are safe states, meaning that they vote for the same political party every single election, all these shows how people are stuck and not thinking.
Yes, it's okay. Now we need to understand why people vote for certain political party. We believe the reason why they vote for a certain political party, either they are not changing political view, is because it represents their political view at the first place. Because it represents the political ideology, it really shows that these people, because they understand what, because it reflect these people ideology, it tend to push that, it tend to lead in a way that these people will follow the ideology at the first speaker. Okay, second issue, government authority. The side of opposition, the side of government didn't really clarify on how these people are going to work in the government and in the governance authority. All they say that oh, we are going to change. We are going to discussing. Oh, these people are progressive. These people will not do mockery at the film. We tell you that this is not true. Why? Because number one, they don't really clarify on how it is less likely for these people to not do mockery at the film, because mockery at the first film. Okay. Before that, we tell you that how when you have different ideology, we don't think as people who are voting, we don't see people understand the whole government on how the government mission at the first place. It really shows, because these people have different ideology. People tend to confuse or tend to not know what does the side of the government authority is fighting for. And because these people have different ideology, these people don't know what this kind of thing will lead to people not knowing. This will lead to people not doing discussion because they have different ideology. Everyone wanted to protect their ideology. This will lead to people this will lead to issues such as the laws, the late law and so on. But compared to outside, we tell when these people have ideology, these people are connected by their ideology, we believe this will lead to people to have better unity. And when these people have unity, this will lead to people to do better discussion at the end of the day. And even if they do bad decision, we tell you that there's coalition. We tell you that they are not going to discuss just around the bubble. Coalition exists, and this will not and because coalition exists, then it's not that they're going to do biased thing and so on. Speaker, lastly, what is better for people? We tell them when in politics, people wanted an ideology where it present the ideology at the film seeker. But in this context, when we're talking about individual independent candidate, we are talking about as if in government authority it has 50 people, and then we need 50 people to have different ideology. We think it's very hard to digest, especially if you're average voter and so on, because it's very hard to digest. People in your side are less likely to engage with politics. We tell you that when people understand this collectively what their political ideology is about, people are more likely to tend jumping in politics and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, second, lastly, why do we win? We tell that number one, how having political ideology will make people engage in politics better. Second, we tell that when we have unity, when we have this kind of same ideology, this will lead to discussion in government to be better, efficient. Even if discussion is bad, we tell that these people will have an ideology. A good discussion because these people have good ideology compared to your side. And thirdly, we tell when these people, we tell this is better for people because people, people can engage better in our politics. With that, if you're in a world where people don't engage in politics, you want unity happen in government authority, vote for the side of government, the side of opposition win. Thank you.
The opposition whip spoke for 8 minutes and 70 seconds. Now for the reply speech, allow me to change the timer first. Wait. So we are ready for the reply speech. Now I would like to invite the speaker Alia from the opposition to deliver her reply speech. Here.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, we believe in a time of political crisis, we don't want to have more experimentation going on, because by implementing this motion, there's a lot of things that we cannot expect that can happen, right? And we already explained to you why it's more important and why there is a necessity for us to continue the status quo, and why by implementing government's motion will not actually change what's going to happen at the end of the day. It doesn't solve the political crisis. We gave you the justification as to why that happened. But a few things coming from the government side, right? So the government actually failed to respond to our question about their mechanism. We asked them, who are these candidates who can actually seek the election, and how will they actually monitor these kinds of candidates? Secondly, government's mechanism will actually less likely reach their objective of having an efficient government and solving the political crisis. Why do we say that? We say that it's because our side believes that this is not the answer, because you don't get to prevent the biasness or the conflict or the political war that's going on between these candidates, because the difference is between parties and parties on our side, but on your side is between the candidates themselves. And you try to push for the narrative that these candidates can actually they can actually campaign it better and things like that. But understand that when you are campaigning alone, you have a lack of foundation, you have a lack of support, you have a lack of funding and resources. So it's less likely for these candidates to actually emerge and become recognized by these kinds of people and become chosen for the government in the first place. Because if you compare that to the politicians or the candidates that already exist that can campaign with a large amount of money, they are more likely to actually gain the amount of votes, because at the end of the day, your side tries to solve the political crisis, and by saying that people will obviously choose for the people who have good manifestos that can cater to them. But understand that people can still be irrational. People can still not choose properly, and they can choose the politicians that have the most money, the politicians that won't actually solve the issue at hand, right? So the problem in status quo is that they see there's a lack of efficiency, there's bureaucracy, and there's like Malay support Malay. But understand that on their side, they actually don't solve the problem, because the problem now doesn't exist between political parties, but it exists between these political candidates in the first place. We already explained to you why it's less efficient for these political candidates to campaign on their own, because political parties have more influence. They can actually do better. And when they have an idea and they want to project something, they can actually project that in the political party compared to trying to fight for it themselves in the first place. So believe that by having this political party, where I explained to you, there's more likely for politicians to have the same ideology and have the same stances, and they can also progress those stances and progress those ideologies by having party coalitions. So this can also cause less conflict and create more chemistry between these politicians, so they can be more efficient as a government. How did they respond to this? They said that, oh, it's okay, we don't want chemistry as long as laws are still passed. But understand that when you don't have proper discussion and you don't have proper chemistry, that will not lead to a sufficient government, because you're not considering all sides of the party. You're saying that conflict should happen and you want these laws to pass without having proper consideration in the first place. So in government's world, it's harder for actually candidates to gain recognition because they have the lack of resources, right? So they never responded to our response to this kind of argument in the first place. So what is the comparison, right? On government side, they actually don't guarantee the competency of these candidates, because people can still choose unwisely, and people may choose the wrong candidates or the wrong government. So how do they actually ensure the candidates can work well together? They didn't say that, and they just assumed that might happen in the first place. They also tried to they also said that people will fight hard and to become prime minister, and they'll fight hard and they will show their effort, right? But understand that it's more difficult for these people, because even if you fight hard, people might still not see you, because there are still people who are better than you, right? So the comparison between our side is we have more discourse in these political parties, and people can actually make better decisions and make better laws and things like that. So we have more objectives that can actually be discussed through political coalitions. There was more unity and more efficiency, and there will be a lack of conflict. So you actually want a world where politics and if you want a world where we can actually achieve a government that systematically can handle the world properly, then go with side opposition.
Okay, thank you for the reply speech from the opposition. Now I would like to invite Iyad from the government to deliver the government reply. Here.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but can I go to the toilet real quick? Just wait 1 minute.
Okay.
All right, next here. Am I?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, starting my speech in 3. Opposition reply speech started off saying the conditions in times of crisis. Here's the thing. In times of crisis, you have to shift to a new approach. To repeat the same thing and repeating over and over again, expecting the same result is insanity. So I don't know who said that, but it was someone important. Let's talk about my reply speech is going to be into twofold. Number one, opposition's mistakes, and number two, what we did right. Opposition's mistakes. There's a few three things. Number one, they didn't hear our characterization well. They came up and spent a lot of time talking about coalitions when we talk about how independency is one of the main core of elections. Number two, they didn't even hear our reasons well. Wit had the audacity to come out and told you that we didn't prove to you why there's going to be less bickering. I quote to you my speech, there's going to be party merit and party integrity. Number three, there's a few problems within their world that they deem is a benefit. Number one, they think that the fewer the candidates, is better. Here's the thing, we don't think that that's the problem. We don't think that as many candidates as they can, as long as it's not as if we're going to want as lot more candidates, but we don't have a problem when there's a lot of candidates to offer in that particular election year. So when there's going to be many candidates, that's where the representation of people is to the maximum, because people choose who is the best. People have better evaluation, people have many choices to begin with. The only trade-off that you're going to make here is that there's going to be more effort in printing the candidate cards, because there's too many faces that you need to print, so it might just be a trade-off for you to buy more ink for these election years. Number two, people don't know how to vote because independent candidates can't formulate their own stance. A, they can, and more likely going to be the truest because they aren't restrained by the party. And B, there's a corrective mechanism to evaluate. Whip said, the opposition whip told you that people aren't dumb. So we question you, why can't this corrective mechanism be functional in our world? Number three, they told that's a problem. That's with less funding and resources. By the way, it's a new material from Reply. We don't think that that's a problem because the election itself is a filtration system to decide who deserves the funding the most. So why must it be judged on resources? And if you take a step back and think about it, the reason why resources and funding is what dilutes the vision of the people to begin with, because you're going to have tens filled with the faces of one person. The polystyrene food packaging is going to have their face on top of it, saying that they deserve it to be. The question to you, it diverts the attention away from the manifestos that they actually have to offer. And here comes them, talking about efficiency. When all spectrums are represented, which by the way is elected by the people, this is much more better. Rather on your world, the discussions in your WhatsApp group, for example, or your ministerial cabinets, only look like them adhering to that particular top president or that party because he intense bureaucracy. So you tell you the discussions on our world are much more preferable. Let's talk about why proposition wants this debate. Number one, prove to you how we remedy political crises. There's going to be less polarization within parliament, which means that we are able to be bipartisan when the time requires it. On your world, when you're debating about environmental problems, you're still going to be partisan about it. We don't see how it's preferable. Number two, there's also going to be fruitful discussions. That means better laws only in our world. Let's talk about how we enforce democracy. My argument specifically, I told you that how the eyes of the voters are clearest in proposition. Evaluation is much more better. I also proved to you 5 reasons why we empower the people when competent leaders are in office. There's going to be cohesive discussions that takes into account everything and not populistic in nature. There's going to be maximum accountability. The bad leaders are sacked. Even in the cases of impeachment, people are more likely to be brave to have a no confidence vote rather than on your work. People are scared because it's bad for their integrity within the party. They want to get promoted within the ranks of the party. There's third reason is high incentive to do as well as they can. Number four, the people elected are actually representing the ideology of the people in those constituents. And lastly, there's going to be intense party bureaucracy that is only existent inside opposition. So, Chair, what is to conclude? The conclusion here is this: side proposition promises a safer work for everyone on the ground. Everyone is represented. Side opposition benches them. Never been prouder to propose.
Hi, okay, thank you for the reply speech from the government. So thank you everyone for the debate. Since this is the silent round, so there will be no verdict will be given. But before we exit the main hall, let's take a screenshot together. Can we? Okay, everyone's ready?